But if you already know, how can I make a choice?
Because you didn't come here to make the choice. You've already made it. You're here to try to understand why you made it.
And welcome to you, to the Church of the Agnostic. I am Uncle James, your very own agnostic messenger. So, today, this starts off our series in the Meaning of Life. And in the Meaning of Life series, we're going to go over several topics about who is God, what is God, who are you, what are you, and why we're here. And ultimately, as the description of, the video says, what is the meaning of life? So we're going to begin today here in the Church of the Agnostic. Who is God and what is God? And how does that pertain to being agnostic? What is that, what is an agnostic in the place of, the world as it is today? So mankind, to start off, has pondered who or what God is. What is this internal thing in our hearts that lead us to believe that there's something more? We have made several names in the past, thousands of years. Yahweh, Jesus, Allah, Shiva, and so on. Although there's another group called atheist, and they tend to believe that God does not exist. Atheism is non-belief in God, and theism is a belief in God. And in my view, they are two sides of the same coin, each requiring an enormous amount of faith to believe wholeheartedly. Faith, by definition, is a belief in something without its evidence. Atheism and religion are separate, but they're separate faiths, believe it or not. As far as empirical data, tangible facts, neither the atheist or the believer can prove their faith or facts beyond a shadow of a doubt. Why is that? Why can't anybody prove faith? Well, faith doesn't include evidence. It just, you believe in it with or without the evidence, and that is belief. That is your truth. Some people become atheists out of religious trauma, some out of disillusionment of whichever religion they may have sprung out of. Those who believe in God do so usually because they grew up in a particular area or culture in the region or geography that they are born in. Say the difference of growing up in South America, Catholicism as opposed to Middle East Muslim. Where you live is going to greatly affect where your personal choice of religion comes from. Things are changing, however. You'll notice that in modern life, because we have such access to technology at our fingertips, information is so readily available now by social media. It's more abundant than ever. Even in so-called third worlds, in developing countries, where the choices of how to worship God are much more apparent. So you're going to start getting this divergence of what people begin to believe in, because now information is so readily available everywhere that you may find that someone in different countries like the Middle East become Christian, and people in the Eastern world become something else, other than what they were born into. But what about agnosticism, as I mentioned earlier? Why must we choose one religion over the other? Well, Gnosticism is, like you would say, a third choice. Believe or believe not. Well, we don't have to believe at all, and either or, and that is by definition the very definition of agnosticism. And here's how I qualify agnosticism as a valid form of belief. One belief system that a lot of theists or believers believe in, go hand in hand with agnosticism, is called pantheism or panentheism. It's a way of saying that God is all that exists, and nothing exists beyond God, the universe, and all the universe thereafter. Conversely, as a result of this belief, there is no false God outside of God. I am that I am means God is all that exists. So if you choose one religion over the other, that's correct for you, that's okay. Choosing no religion is also correct, and thereby being agnostic is also correct as well. There's no wrong answer in this whole choose A, B, C, or D, or die. That's not happening here. That is an incorrect belief to believe that if you don't choose, you may end up going to hell or be cast out or destroyed by God and his infinite smiting power. Here's the thing. Well, Uncle James, how can they all be correct? That's not possible. Well, here's how. This is the fundamental of the Church of the Agnostic. This is Basic 101. Who is God? What is God? Most people who believe in one God, a monotheist, usually tend to believe that God is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. These are big words for saying God knows everything, God is everywhere, and has all power to do what he or God wants to do. So let's examine that. If you say that God knows everything, is everywhere, that means he exists in everything, then he's all powerful, and he knows everything. God then, therefore, if he's bigger than the universe, if he is the whole entire universe, he couldn't then, therefore, not be summed up in one book. He can't. Whether you're referring to the Quran or the Vedas or the Bible, each of them would say that they are incorrect in presuming who God is or the character of God. But they also may be correct at the same time. And this is a big paradox that we must then figure out here in this Church of the Agnostic, and let's figure this out. So, omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. That means God is all-powerful. Everything that exists in God, nothing can exist outside of God. Okay? So that is the central belief that we come from, which I believe is the basis of all religion. Now, where we all begin to diverge is, oh, God wants this, God wants that, God says this, God does that, then we all start to diverge. But essentially, the beginning is God is everything, God is everywhere, nothing exists outside of God, including you. But before we move on to you, let's talk about the nature of God, and let's talk about God, and let's look to nature to give us maybe some answers or an idea. And you'll hear me in this channel say this a lot, that we should look to nature as a guide. Nature, as a creation of God, is also therefore a reflection of God. If under a microscope you view a fertilized animal cell, fertilized animal cell is called a zygote, and under the microscope we can see that it starts off as one cell. After a while, the cell becomes two through a process called cellular mitosis. So once there was just one cell, now there are two. So while they were separate, there are now two. There are two cells, seemingly separate from each other, but in part of the one same organism. You see what I'm saying? God encompasses all. He is the entire organism. Nothing exists outside of God. While God cannot be separated per se, God can evolve and expand. So this is what you see, the basics, I would say, the absolute minimal basics of what you see from the animal kingdom and nature. That a single cell can then multiply into many different cells, into something, an organism that's much more complex and so much bigger as an animal or a human being even. So those cells, those individual cells, may seem separate, but they function as one in the whole dynamic of the entire organism. And this is how we view God as an agnostic. Here in the Church of the Agnostic, we view God as being, we view us as being individual small parts of the whole God part. Seemingly separate, but always forever connected. So we speak a lot of times about God in linear terms, only from an understanding of time. This kind of give God a little bit more complexity. But we also, and most religions would also believe that while God is everything, he is also does not have a beginning and therefore does not have an end. For the sake of this teaching, we say that God perhaps one day decided to make a mirror image of himself so that we may, us, see himself apart from him, but as one, in order to reflect God upon us, and we reflect God back to him. So together, we are perceiving each other and coming together as seemingly two separate things, but reflecting each other and reunifying, becoming one, through discovering each other. So this is an oversimplification of what we mean, or what we say, what's going on here in the meaning of life, but it kind of gives scratching the surface, if you will, of this whole thing that we call life. Of course, we're not the first ones, in this day and age to come up with this concept. Older religions, Hinduism in particular, was one of the first to name this universal force, this universal concept, in the early Vedas. This is before the Bhagavad Gita and some of the more modern texts, which, of course, we know Hinduism has many different gods. If you would ask any Hindu and come up to them, well, what do you believe Shiva is, or what do you believe Vishnu is? And they would say, these are aspects of one source that is God, the overall encompassing God, called Brahman. Brahman is the universal force. Nothing exists outside of Brahman. Brahman is all that exists. So as you see, we're not the first ones to come up with this idea. Mankind has been given this perception before. From the early Vedas, the Brahman then had created Atman out of himself, out of itself. We are what is called the Atman, a piece of God, both separate and forever connected to God as source. And as I kind of just briefly mentioned earlier, the reason for this is so that God can experience himself like he could never before. Why would God know? If he knows everything, why would God want to experience himself? Well, we know God is not so simplified that he doesn't know himself, but we know that God can only, because being so vast and being everything and exists as everything, God can only expand and evolve. So one could easily posit and conceive of the idea that God, being so expanding as he is, would then expand into many different universes, many different alternate states of being, many different beings, and thus here we are, human beings, created as to be part of God, with a purpose, different purposes. So let's go into who we are. Who are you? What is a human being? We start off by saying that what you are, that you are an eternal being living a temporary human existence. How do I prove this? Well, what would give us that idea? What can we use to kind of maybe just see how how could we be eternal? Let's do a thought experiment. I want you to close your eyes and follow with me through this thought experiment, if you will. And imagine yourself, this is what I call the white room thought experiment. And imagine yourself in this white room, and I want you to imagine a table with a turkey dinner in this room, and it's got chairs around the table, and various things on the table that you would imagine would be at a turkey dinner, on a table on Thanksgiving Day or something like that, or on a celebration day. So in this room, I want you to take that turkey that's on that table and delete it, so that that turkey is no longer on the table. So now you can imagine the table, now that you've deleted that particular item off the table, that table does not have a turkey on it. Remove all of the things that you previously imagined that was on that table and remove them. The plates, the centerpieces, remove that off the table so it's just a blank table, nothing on it. Now, take those chairs that are around the table that we mentioned before and take each of them away, so that all you have left is just one single table with nothing on it in a white room. I want you to come up and walk to that table, so that imagine yourself in a white room, and all that exists in this white room is you and this one table. Now, remove the table. So now that all that is left in this white room is you and nothing else. Now, I want you to remove yourself, so that you don't exist in this white room. Can you do it? Well, you would say, oh no, obviously I can't remove myself from the right room. I'm in there. I'm in the right room. I can't remove myself unless I walked out of the white room and went somewhere else. Well, what I'm trying to get at is that if you try to remove yourself from this reality, you cannot, because you're still constantly observing. You cannot remove yourself from it's a thought experiment, a way of saying that you're an eternal being living a temporary human existence. You are the observer with God. We are co-creators, co-observers, and co-experiencers with God in this life. Now enters life. What is life? Why, if we're an eternal beings, are we here then in this existence? The 3D, as we call it. What we call reality. Reality is separated in a way. It exists in God. Nothing exists outside of God. But it is reality separated from God's light and love. There's a difference. It exists in God, so God cannot be removed. Therefore, we as eternal beings cannot be removed from existence. But our perception of God can be limited, like pulling a veil over your eyes or putting some goggles with dark glasses. So because this 3D experience is heavy and thick with darkness, the perception of God is hidden from us. Well, why would we do this? Why would we hide ourselves from the perception of God? And this is what creates an experience called contrast. Contrast is simply an artistic term, a way of saying separating the light from the dark. Only in this darkness can then you experience the light with so much profundity that if you existed in light and had no darkness, you wouldn't see yourself. You wouldn't be able to see God any other way. Take your perception away from that, surrounded in darkness, and then reveal God after that, then it's a whole new experience. You see what's happening here? Another way of understanding this, let's kind of bring it to human terms and maybe get a little better understanding. Say, for example, you suddenly jump into a pool, a room temperature pool of water, and it's going to feel shockingly cold. Your body temperature is 98, usually around 98 point some odd degrees, and you jump into a pool, it's about 72 degrees, it's going to be cold, and it's going to shock you. Another example is if you suddenly turn off the lights and you can't see anything, is because your body, in these cases, are used to the status quo. And if you suddenly change the environment that you're in, it's a bit shocking to your senses. Your senses then have to adjust to it. So while you're swimming in this pool of water, room temperature water, you soon get used to it. You walk around in the dark in a while, soon your eyes are going to adjust to what little light is available in there, and you start to see. Human beings have night vision. It's not as acute as, say, like a cat's or a dog's, but we do have night vision, and the eyes do adjust to it. If there's a little bit of light, eventually, after a while, your eyes get used to it. So again, we're looking to nature to see, to kind of explain what is this experience and what is contrast. Always look to nature. There's always going to be a lesson somewhere in nature and everything. So here we are, we jump in the deep end of creation, insulated from God's light and his love, for the purpose of coming to the profound realization of God's glory once our eyes are opened back up to him. This is why we can't see God clearly in this life, in this 3D experience. Why God's existence seems hidden from everybody. And this kind of goes back to the earlier question that we had, is why can't anybody prove God's existence? Is because this is by design. Whose design? God's design? Our design? We, on a global scale, we chose to close ourselves off from God. And this could be for several reasons. But the primary reason is for the incentive to rediscover God in a new light and experience. And in this, God, through us, discovers new things about himself. And this is the basics of part of what we call the meaning of life. Now, there's more to it. I have 2 other parts to this series, but this first part, we get an idea of who or what God is. That God is, as it relates to an all-powerful, omniscient God who exists everywhere, and that nothing exists outside of him, and he is all that exists. We are a creation of God, one and equal to God as one. He exists within you. You cannot separate God from yourself, no matter how many people try. It doesn't work. So we're going to have some more videos here pretty soon. If not already, you might be able to just jump into the next part of the series, part 2 of the meaning of life. But now that we've explored who God is and who you are in some basic terms, and kind of touched the surface of why we are here, I believe the next video will come into a little bit more greater detail as what are we doing here? Why are we here? What is our purpose? What is our karma? So you say, Uncle James, well, I don't believe this. I don't believe any of this crap that you're saying. After all, I would say I cannot prove anything that I say. That's true. None of it's provable, as I just said. But no one else can either prove their religion either, just so you know. So how can you trust what I have to say? Look, I know it's a pickle, no doubt about it. So it's up to you whether you're going to accept what I have to say or not, and I expect each and every one of you to make up your own damn minds.